Again, I'm with Sauron. Wipe them all out, cleanse Middle Earth. Hello, this is Mara Jade, and I'm back with another spoiler review for Rings of Power. I did not do one for episode 5 because, for two reasons. One, I just did not have time to sit down and do a spoiler review, and two, there really wasn't much to exactly cover because it was a filler episode. Despite the lore breaking, it was boring as fuck. Nothing happened of note that I could not cover in just a live stream, which is what I did last week. But we're now on to episode 6 of this series in season 2, and the only positive I can say is that there's only 2 more episodes left. But here are my spoiler thoughts. I'm not going to go into everything that happens in this episode. I'll cover that in a live stream tomorrow, but here are my overall thoughts, basically. So, picks up where episode 5 leaves off. Breaking lore left and right. They're still doing Celebrimbor dirty. They're giving him qualities, personality qualities, that were more akin to Feanor. Alright, and if anyone knows about Feanor, you know what I'm talking about, and how Celebrimbor would never, ever, ever, ever be at all like his grandfather, basically. Feanor is an example of how not to be, literally, amongst the elves. They would not revere him, they would not honor him. Celebrimbor would not have Feanor's hammer, nor would he have a fucking statue dedicated to Feanor in Eregion, which is what we see in this episode. We see a statue dedicated to Feanor. Feanor, the architect of the kinslaying amongst the elves, would never, ever be revered, as I said, basically. But they're giving qualities of Feanor to Celebrimbor, such as being easily manipulated, duplicitous, and is lying to Gilgalad about creating more rings of power, prideful, and so forth, basically. Everything that Celebrimbor was not. Alright, so they're still doing him dirty in this episode, and they're going from creating the 7 rings for the dwarves, and they're moving on to trying to create 9 rings for the race of men, but they're having trouble doing so because they've run out of mithril. Mithril that all of a fucking sudden has become a life force in Middle-earth, which is a substance, which is nothing more than basically a pretty, extremely durable rock, mineral, whatever you want to call it, dug out of the earth, and it's only coveted by the elves because it can be made into pretty jewels and so forth, basically. It has now all of a sudden become the lifeblood of Middle-earth, alright, and is needed for the Rings of Power in this series. So they've created the 7 rings for the dwarves, which goes against lore. The dwarves should not have the rings at all at this point. The only one that maybe should have a ring would be Durin the Third, and that's fucking it. That's it, basically, at this point. But again, they are not following the timeline as it's explicitly laid out in the appendices. This timeline is all over the fucking place. But in actual lore, Sauron lays siege to Eregion, alright, and takes 16 of the 19 rings of power, alright? 9 of which he gives to men, 7 of which he gives to the dwarves, alright? 3 he does not claim because those were created by Celebrimbor himself and given in safekeeping to the elves, right? So Sauron finds out about those rings, but he doesn't know where they are. That's the reason why those rings he cannot affect, because he had no hand in creating them. Okay? Anyway, so basically it's, again, doing Celebrimbor dirty. And Sauron, under the guise of Anatar, or not Anatar in my opinion, because nothing in this series is at all remotely canonical, tells the Elven Smiths, and basically Celebrimbor, don't worry your pretty little head, I'll take care of the day-to-day activities in the city, and I'll go talk to the dwarves to get more mithril for the rings, basically. So he does that, and he performs something, I have no idea, a little bit of trickery to get the mithril, basically, and claim that it was refined into a particles, small particles, small enough for the rings of power that Celebrimbor is trying to create by Narvi. He basically, Anatar lies to Celebrimbor, and, Celebrimbor, not being Celebrimbor, being fucking stupid in the series, believes him, basically. He's so focused on creating these 9 rings of power that he doesn't see everything that's transpiring necessarily around him, to the point where he even forgets one of the Elven Smith's names. Again, something that Celebrimbor would never fucking do. Alright? And not only is he easy manipulated that way, but when Eregion is actually sieged at the end of this episode, which would not happen at this point because Eregion is not captured until Sauron and his forces do so after the Rings of Power are created, when Sauron reveals himself with the One Ring in Second Age year 1600. Alright? So it wouldn't happen yet. But the orcs are laying siege to Eregion because they have basically an inkling, essentially, that Sauron is hiding out there. They just don't know how, they just don't know what he looks like until Galadriel basically stupidly confirms for Adar that Hellbrand was Sauron. Okay, yeah, you basically just confirmed for me the guy I should be looking for, pretty much, so I don't really, I'm going to put you back in chains. I don't really need you right now. So, legions of orcs under the fucking noses of the elves who have the keenest eyesight in Middle-earth, basically, are fucking surprised that legions of orcs have been amassing just about right outside their fucking gates. Yes, elves! Remember in Two Towers when Aragorn says, Legolas, what do your elf eyes see? And Legolas is able to see in the way fucking distance where the Orcai are taking the two hobbits. We can't see with our normal eyes, but Legolas can, and you're telling me that these fucking elves have the nerve to act shocked when they're besieged by orcs? It just fucking boggles the mind. But at any rate, so that's basically what happened in Eregion. Basically, I kind of covered that storyline. Then you have the storyline at Numenor because Elendil has been arrested for high treason. In the last episode, the targeting of the faithful essentially made it look like they were targeting the faithful because of their loyalty to the queen. Not so much because it's not so much because of that in actual lore, but because the faithful, per their name, they're faithful to God. They're Eru or Iluvatar. They're faithful to the Valar. They're faithful to Valinor. Basically, that's why they're called the faithful. They still basically have speak Kenya, the Elven language, and honor Iluvatar and traditions and rituals and so forth. That's why they're targeted. And there was a brief respite in actual canonical history under Tar Palantir, and through him, basically there was basically the faithful were not targeted. But then once Ar-Pharazôn usurped the throne by forcing Tarmuriel to marry him, there was no usurping of the throne through the coronation or anything like that. He basically did that himself, and taking the throne, and thus basically the targeting resumed. But that's why the faithful were targeted, not so much because of their loyalty to Tarmuriel, even though Tarmuriel herself was part of the faithful through her father. It was more or less because they still worshipped essentially Iluvatar. Their fealty was to Iluvatar and not to the kings, which is what Ar-Pharazôn wanted. He wanted them to pledge fealty to him, basically. And the faithful wouldn't do it, so that's why they were targeted. And I'm oversimplifying things, but it's basically the gist. And now Elendil basically has to go by trial of Abyss, I think, or whatever it's fucking called. It's completely made up for this episode. It's not even in canon. Basically what it is a trial by faith, essentially, where it's he has to wade down to the water, and if he's pulled down by one of the sea worms and not eaten, then he's deemed innocent because the Valar protected him. And Tarmuriel kind of goes in his place, because she said, his crimes were committed in my name, so I'm going to do, basically take his place in the trial of the Abyss, or whatever the fuck it's called. She's deemed innocent because the sea worm spits her out. Alright, so she's innocent of what? I don't fucking know. The series doesn't even fucking clarify that, pretty much. But that's what transpires in Numenor. I have no idea where it's going to move forward because Ar-Pharazôn is using the Palantir, and you see in this episode where, he's starting to form a connection with Sauron. Sauron, who manipulates Ar-Pharazôn in actual canon to capture him and take him back to Numenor, where he basically corrupts most of the Numenorians. But that's neither here nor there in this series. Alright? The last thing that this really touches on, a major storyline, is basically the dwarves. And you have, again, there would not be two Durins at the same time, but you have this Prince Durin worried about his father. He wants his father to take off the ring. He's he's seeing his excessive greed and so forth, where it never really, at least in terms of the excessiveness, never existed within his father. And he's scared. He does not trust. He does not trust Anatar or anything like that. He wants him to basically kind of stop doing dealings with the elves and so forth. He's emotional. He's probably probably I would say another positive I could say about this episode is probably one of the best scenes in terms of acting in this episode was the actor who plays Prince Doran when he's breaking down in tears in front of Disa, and he's like, it's like I can't do what you're asking me to do, and that is like to go against my father, because yes, I know what's become of my father, but at the same time I look into his eyes and I still see my father. So, but at any rate, they decide to basically halt the digging, and even if it's just themselves, they're going to halt the digging. And to do so, somehow Disa can call down bats onto the dwarves. Her singing that she uses mainly to kind of hear the mountain essentially, and like know where to dig and understand all the aspects of basically under the ground under cause of doom. She can somehow now call down bats onto the dwarves to scare them away. But that's the overall gist for the dwarf story. It does touch on the Harfoots. Oh, and I'm going to save what happens with not Gandalf for the live stream, because there's a segment with not Gandalf and not Tom Bombadil that really fucking pissed me off. But I'm going to say why that pissed me off until the live stream. But pretty much, that's the gist. That is the my spoiler thoughts on this episode. Wouldn't exactly call it a filler like it's episode 5, but at the same time, I don't know what books they're like these showrunners claim they're going back to, but I want them to list the book names so I can find them and then beat them with those books, because they sure as hell aren't using anything that would remotely be respectful to what Tolkien created. And I feel personally that we need to overtake the Tolkien estate, and I'm looking at you specifically, Simon Tolkien, because for you allowing this abomination to occur spits in the eye of your grandfather. It's literally spitting in the eye of J.R.R. Tolkien when you allow this travesty to occur. Why? Because what? You wanted to make money. That's all. That's the only thing I can fucking think of, because anyone worth their weight in terms of claiming to be a Tolkien fan, a fan of Middle-earth, a fan of everything that Tolkien created, would have looked at what the showrunners were doing, even in the planning stages, and said no. They would have said, no, we're not doing this, because this is disrespectful to everything Tolkien stood for, everything he wrote, everything he created. But at any rate, so that is episode 6, ladies and gentlemen, and like I said, I'll be going into a spoiler live stream breakdown tomorrow about 8:30 p.m. Eastern on my YouTube channel, so look for that. Have you seen this episode? If you have, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Are you in between? Let me know all that fun stuff. What do you think of the series so far? Did you watch Season 1? What did you think of it? Are you watching Season 2? What do you think of that? Let me know all that. Until my next spoiler review for Rings of Power Season 2. Thank God there's only 2 more fucking episodes left in this entire season. Until then, ladies and gentlemen. Until my next video, catch you on the dark side. Peace.